Rush the foxhole. Kill, kill, kill! One of the courses we did was sort of like laser tag. They outfitted us with these devices that would ping when a rifle with blanks was fired in your direction. We were supposed to be able to shoot at the other platoons. It never really worked out that well. The equipment just didn't work. However, we did get the opportunity to rush from one foxhole to another and hit them with grenades. They were just training grenades. When the pins were pulled, you would have 10 seconds and then you would hear a small pop and some smoke would be released. Our mission was to run between the trees and then dive to the side of a foxhole position and throw the grenade into the hole, similar to the early foxhole training, but we got to fire our M16s as well. We were supposed to be firing our weapons with the blanks while attacking the foxhole, but I learned early on this was not a good idea. Why, you might ask? The way the blanks worked is they released gunpowder and smoke when fired. The muzzle of the rifle was covered with a suppressor so nothing would come out. This is because without the muscle, the pressure and the gases released at a high rate could actually hurt someone. One time in the field, my buddy took his muzzle projector off and was killing lizards with what was released just from the blanks. Anyway, I learned early on in the military that firing a lot of blanks put a lot of gunpowder and residue into the rifle. Our first job after returning from the range was always to clean our rifles, pull them apart, and clean off all the residue and carbon. The blanks made a mess of the rifle, so bad that the first time I had to clean my weapon after firing blanks, it took me so long, almost an hour. Never again. So I vowed to limit my shots when firing blanks. No worries though, there were plenty of other saps in the unit who would trade me for an empty cartridge instead when they had exhausted all of their blank bullets. Anyway, this was an exercise in killing. Run like a madman toward a protected foxhole and somehow throwing a grenade into it before the enemy shot us. Along the way, the drill sergeants would shoot at us and try to set off the devices strapped on our chest, but the things just didn't work. Modern military equipment was not always the best, especially in basic training. The platoon theme song. With so much time on our hands cleaning and polishing boots, we needed a theme song. One song that soldiers had brought in with them from the outside was Don't Worry, Be Happy by Bobby McFerrin. Don't worry, be happy. It came out on the radio just before we all joined. It was a perfect song for surviving basic training. When we weren't singing cadence, we were all singing or humming this song to ourselves. It kept us grounded and surviving. Final phase. Dear family, well, today was a long but great day for me. First of all, we had our end of the phase training all morning long, ending right before lunch, with the flag changed to blue. Yes, our final phase, thank God. Captain Sneed, our company commander, who looks a lot like Uncle Bob, talked to us about what we will be doing in this final phase. This includes big weapons firing, field training exercises, Super Bowl, and the final PT test. A lot of things to do, but if the weather is bad, a lot will be canceled. We then ate lunch and had our final PT practice. I did 33 push-ups, pass at 32, 39 sit-ups, 42 to pass, and 14:25 run, 16:54 to pass. So as you can see, I'm very close to passing the test. I am sure by next week I will be able to pass it. The final test is Wednesday, December 7th, which I think is one of our last training days. Today, everyone was very motivated, and for once I saw a glimmer of joy in everyone's eyes. The time has come to go home. We went to the PX, and I heard Christmas music for the first time of the year. It made me wish I was home decorating the tree and singing carols. I now have the lungs for singing. Grenade throwing. Dear family, grenade throwing was not really thrilling at all. I missed one target and qualified as a sharpshooter, just like my BRM. That is good at least. The medals will be on my dress green uniforms. Anyway, the actual grenades weren't that thrilling either. We were handed the already armed grenade, we threw it, and then were forced to squat behind a barrier so we didn't even see it land. Oh well, tomorrow will be more fun. We shoot the M60 light anti-tank weapon, the Law, and the M16 grenade launcher, so I'll let you know how that went later on. The grenade range was strange, as we were throwing fake grenades to try and get close to targets. I was never that great at throwing balls, so I passed the test, but not much else. I was excited about throwing an actual grenade, as this sounded amazing. It turned out to be pretty stupid. After the lengthy safety briefing, we were lined up by the first three of our Social Security number. Interesting historical note. Prior to the June of 2011, the first three numbers of your Social Security number represented the geographical region where you received your number. It was interesting waiting in line to talk to others about where they were born. I grew up in Colorado, but I was actually born in Virginia, where my dad was working at the Pentagon. So I was with many of the soldiers from the East. The wait was long, and when we finally got into the building, we were hoping to see something, but the windows were covered with dirt and dust, so you really couldn't do anything but continue to wait. When it was my turn, I went through the door, and the drill sergeants were waiting for me. I went to the barrier, and I got the whole safety lecture again. Finally, the live grenade was handed to me, and I got to throw it. I wanted to see it explode, but the sergeants pulled at me, and I had to sit behind the barrier with them. With earplugs in, the sound of the explosion was less than what you would hear from a fireworks display. I have to say, that was probably one of the most disappointing moments in basic. However, I can say that I have thrown a live grenade before, which is pretty cool. Soda, it must be Thanksgiving. As we got closer to Thanksgiving, there was an excitement in the air. We were more than halfway done, and we heard they had a special dinner waiting for us. Then the call came. I got one of the other wonderful duties, KP, or Kitchen Police. Normally, Thanksgiving would have been like a Sunday, a day of rest, but not for me and the other privates who were chosen. We headed down early in the morning for a full day of work. Two advantages of KP duty. One, they let us use the soda machines we were yearning for all these weeks and were just out of reach. And two, we got to eat early. We worked for a few hours setting things up and getting everything ready, and then we got to eat. They gave us a little more than usual to enjoy the food, but in the end we were still rushed to completion. Along with my fellow privates, we were assigned the dishwashing duty. I guess they didn't feel we were ready for anything harder. The great news was that the big trays from the feeding lines were coming back for cleaning. As hungry as we were, we could sample the leftovers before it went into the sinks for scraping. This meant a second meal. Oh, the dressing was so good. But the work was back-breaking and long. I can't tell you how many plates, trays, and spoons I must have washed that day, but I was so happy when the last one came in and we were free to go. It had been rough, but oh, the taste of a Coca-Cola after 5 weeks was worth every minute of work. Victory Tower. Victory Tower was touted to us throughout basic training as a critical challenge. It was a huge tower of ropes and nets. It was one of the last events to complete our training. If you ever see the movie Marathon Man with Danny DeVito, you will see Victory Tower in the movie because they filmed it at Fort Jackson. Anyway, we would march and run past the tower so many times a week, always there, ready for us. The thing is that I probably feared the tower more than the gas chamber. I do not like heights, which is weird because I used to rock climb in Colorado without ropes. But there is something about standing at the top of a high building with only a small railing to keep you safe that just freaks me out. Well, in the end, we never got to complete Victory Tower. As November turned into December, the weather got worse and worse. We couldn't do the tower in the rain as it was too dangerous. They moved the date for the tower twice, and then finally, it was no longer on the schedule. We missed it. I am still sad to this day that I didn't get to take on that one final challenge in basic. Maybe they would let me go back and try it again? My back hurts. I'm getting out. Some people are just not designed to handle the pressure of the military. It is not an easy thing, as you probably gathered from some of my stories. One guy in the bunk next to me found a way out. He was only a few weeks from graduation, and then it was off to new adventures. Why quit now? I'm pretty sure he faked a back injury. In talking to some of his buddies, they said that the back injury is the way to go because the doctors don't really have a way to prove if it hurts or not, unlike, say, a broken bone. So, anyway, he would walk around the barracks with this expression of pain on his face. He would not make it down to formations on time, and he definitely didn't do any PT. He used his profile to the extreme, and I'm not sure why I didn't believe him, but I didn't. I think it was the fact that just a couple weeks before he was talking about getting out, just quitting and going back to his hometown. Then this mysterious back injury. Anyway, before he went to the final phase of training, they came for him, and he left to go to the medical outprocessing unit to be released. I wished him well, and he was off, already showing a little more spring in his step. Bivouac. No, this isn't camping. We were hoping it wouldn't snow for our final bivouac. This would end with the Super Bowl event. We went out to the woods. This time we rode on the backs of trucks and very uncomfortable wood benches. Sometimes it doesn't pay to have no fat on your butt. While others were fine, I felt every bump as we rode out to the final training weekend. Instead of setting up our tents in formation rows, we were on perimeter guard duty. This meant that my buddy and I would dig a foxhole and guard it all night long. We were told that we would be attacked sometime in the night, and if we were caught sleeping, well, let's just say we better not be caught off guard. I took the first shift alone. It was very dark, and you could see all the shadows. This wouldn't be my first or last time on this type of guard duty, sitting in the cold alone with my thoughts, just trying to stay awake. The stars were out and they were beautiful. Then the flares went off and there was a lot of commotion. Luckily, the attack came from down the way, and so we never saw anything. It did keep me awake watching the green lights in the sky, but then it was over. I got off guard duty and laid down for my 2-hour rest before my next shift. Good news was my buddy fell asleep in the foxhole. We didn't get attacked, and I woke up at sunrise. When you are so cold like that for so long, what you want most is a hot meal for breakfast. However, this was not to be. The drill sergeant stopped by in the morning with our breakfast. Meals ready to eat, MREs. Again, this wouldn't be my first time with these wonderful brown rubber packages, but sorry. The cold chicken a la king didn't cut it after the night of terror. After breakfast, we looked like a pretty sorry bunch of soldiers, cold, wet, tired, and ready for it to all end. We spent the day training and getting ready for Super Bowl. You want me to keep going? You're not. Super Bowl, the final battle around us? One of the last training exercises we went on was called Super Bowl. The Super Bowl was basically war. I just don't know how else to describe it. It starts in a bunker with your squad. The mission is to get to the other side of the field and up the mountain. As soon as it began, I couldn't hear anything. We had our earplugs in for safety, and there were explosions all around us. We headed out of the bunker, carrying our weapons up toward the field. We had to stay low as we climbed up through the woods, and then there was the field. It was barbed wire, and we were forced to crawl underneath in the mud, coming up every few feet to sprint to the next tunnel of barbed wire. There were explosions all around us like fireworks, but these were the ones with the loud boom that shakes you to the core. What a rush it was! In addition to the explosions, there were drill sergeants firing tracer rounds above our heads. Now, I'm not sure that if I stood up I wouldn't get hit by a bullet. That would be a safety hazard. But they did make sure and tell us not to stand up. The tracer rounds and the explosions all around us made it difficult to concentrate. Really, I just wanted to look at the fireworks like it was 4th of July. But of course, this feeling was quickly ended by the drill sergeants yelling to move, move, move! When it wasn't actually a battle, I could see how hard it would be to be a soldier in war with things blowing up all around me. I won't forget this training anytime soon. It was very hard to concentrate on anything. Me with my puny rifle in comparison to these huge explosions made it seem like this was a battle that really couldn't be won. However, I know that it only takes one brave soldier to make it to the other side to turn the corner on a fight. PT test, or in other words, weeding out the untrained ones. The physical training test, PT test, is something all soldiers have to pass to get out of basic training. There were no exceptions from what I could see. The test is 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. The PT test is something we had to do on a regular basis, even in our regular unit. The minimum standards were based on your age. When I entered the military, I was strong, but not very tough. All of the PT every morning helped to make me stronger. My first PT test was on the second day of basic, and it was bad. I was doing some push-ups, but they didn't count. You have to go all the way down so that your arms out at the elbow formed a 90-degree angle. Then you must come all the way back up and lock out your arms. If you don't do this, the drill sergeant doesn't count it. And of course, you can't complain. So I would be doing push-ups, and I would say 1, he would say 1, then 1 again, then 2, and so on. Plus, 2 minutes is a long time to stay in the front-leaning rest position. If you put your knee down, it's done. So I think I maybe got 15 or 20 push-ups the first time. This was actually good compared to a few of my fellow recruits. I thought I would easily be able to reach the standard after 8 weeks. However, the scary one was the sit ups. I have always hated ab exercises, and since I couldn't touch my toes, I avoided these kind of exercises. That first day, I got one. Yes, one sit up. I was in trouble. But it just made me work harder in basic to achieve. I have always been a good runner, so the 2 mile run was no problem. In the last week of basic, we knew we were at the final test, the one that would decide if you graduate or if you are recycled back to basic for remedial training. In this case, we had heard from others that recycled meant lots and lots of PT to get you ready, and also lots and lots of detail assignments. You were the go-to group when anyone needed anything on post. What was surprising is they took us to breakfast chow first before the final PT test. Yuck! Why would I want to eat a big meal before PT? I skipped most of the food due to my nerves. It was a brisk, clear day out at the track, and the drill sergeants were in prime form, ready to yell at every mistake. I knew the numbers I had to achieve, and I went for it. In the end, I passed all the tests. Not well, but I did it. The biggest surprise, I think, was the older guy in our unit. He had to be close to 30 years old, a smoker his entire life, but the man could run. He was under 11 minutes that day, a sub 6 mile pace twice. It was a celebration after that. We did lose a few more soldiers who hadn't passed the PT test, but for most of us, this was the final test and we were going to graduate. The end is in sight. Dear family, next week is basically the last week of training. The week after that looks like this. Monday, get paid and buy tickets home. Tuesday, go to reception battalion and get fitted for Class A uniforms. Most of December will be spent on details around post and marching in preparation for graduation. 1 week of nightmares left, and we will be done. I can't believe in 4.5 weeks I will be home. Detail week, or how many stupid things can they have us do to keep us busy? Details. It's not about paying attention to detail, which is something very important in the Army. No, the details I'm referring to are about being somewhere on the post to do menial labor. In the last few weeks of training, we were sent on many details, and it became harder and harder to avoid them. Sometimes they would just take the whole platoon. Many times it was filling those damn sandbags. Why does the Army need so many sandbags? They are used to line trails, to break up exercise areas, to make foxhole positions, and any other crazy shit the drill sergeant can think of. One of the more memorable details at the end of this time was with the Specialist E4 stationed at Fort Jackson. I was a private first class E3 because of my college credit when I came in. He was a supply specialist, like I would be someday, but for today his duty was to drive us out of the post gate and pick up trash along the highway. There were two of us he brought along in his truck. Right away he told us to chill out, because he wasn't a drill sergeant and he didn't need to be saluted or anything. I asked him if it would be okay to ask questions about regular duty. He was happy to share, telling us that basic was nothing like permanent duty. In permanent duty, we would have to salute sometimes, but mostly we would be able to talk to our leaders like we would on any regular job. The worst part, he said, was being stationed at a training duty post, like here at Fort Jackson, because there were so many drill sergeants and officers walking around that everyone was constantly on edge. Even though he was a soldier stationed here and not in basic training, he was treated much differently. The duty was a relatively easy one as we went up and down the road picking up trash. We gathered maybe 20 bags of trash, and I got some fresh air outside of the gate. He wished us good luck in the future and drove us back to the barracks. I hoped then that my permanent duty would not be at a training post. I wouldn't leave my permanent duty station until close to the end of advanced training, which was scheduled in Fort Lee, Virginia after the holidays. The final march. The day had come for the final march, the one to the end of the road and the parade field. We had passed all of our classes. We had complete all of the required training exercises, and we were ready. Everyone was rested and happy, ready to move on to our advanced training. We had a few of these special parades throughout our time here, and they were difficult. The hardest part for me was standing perfectly still in parade rest at full attention. When you're in formation like this and there's an audience, you must be perfectly still. The audience can see every movement you make. Luckily, I wasn't in the first row, although that might have been better so I could see. Mostly, all I could see at graduation was the back of the soldier in front of me. They gave lots of speeches about how proud they were of us, and I tried my best to stand still. We had been told not to lock out our knees as it would cause you to faint. Luckily, I survived, but I know that I was moving around way too much. I have never been one to stand still or to sit still. I just have too much energy. ADHD probably, but they didn't diagnose kids with attention deficit hyperactive disorder when I was in school. The speeches ended and we were brought to attention, told to right face and then march. We were headed to the end. When we got close to the stage, it was eyes right, and we could see all the people in the audience, along with the generals with the rows and rows of medals. So many parents and families had come to see. My parents and family weren't there. In fact, that was something I would have to get used to in these reunion times. I was alone until I got back to Colorado. With the end of the march, those with family members could head back to the barracks, pick up their stuff, and they were out of there. For the rest of us, it was a long wait until we could get transportation. One of the biggest mistakes in my life was deciding to take the Greyhound bus home. I was trying to save money, stupid, and I bought a one-way ticket with Greyhound to anywhere in the country for $39. It sounded great. They told me I'd be back in Colorado within 24 hours. Not too bad. It would give me time to see the country and I would only lose a day. Famous last words. The change had come. When we got back to the barracks, everyone was in a good mood, even the drill sergeants. We had lost 8 soldiers altogether due to medical discharges or recycled for failing the PT tests. I don't know what the percentage needed is to maintain troops, but this probably seems like a reasonable amount out of the 58 we started with. We were given back our personal gear, and for the first time I was able to see well again with my contacts. No more glasses for me. Oh, and we got our music back. The drill sergeants lightened up, but we still had to show respect. We were taken to the big PX to shop. It was great to actually look through cassette tapes to find some new music for my trip home. We still had to pull fire guard duty, and with fewer soldiers, there was more and more of this duty. But the detail duties were done. We were officially privates rather than recruits. One day at lunch, Kennedy, the female drill sergeant, sat next to us. She too had changed. It turns out we were her first group as a drill sergeant, and she was happy to survive it as well. I realized then that maybe someday I could be a drill sergeant. It is sort of like playing a part on stage. They aren't mean at heart. They are just there to train us, to protect us, but most of all, to give us the discipline to be soldiers. Well, maybe I couldn't do that. I don't think I could yell like they do. The bus trip from hell. I was so excited to be out of there. I got on the bus and we were off. I have never traveled long distance on a bus, but what I learned right away is that I was lied to. This bus wasn't going straight to Colorado. It was going to stop in every fucking little town along the way. We would just be making good time and picking up miles, and then it would be off the highway and into a little town. And a lot of times it wasn't just a pick up and go. We would stop and the bus driver would say we had an hour layover, or it was time to switch buses, or some other shit. Then there were the people. I guess I realized then who would ride the bus instead of fly. It was a lot less than the price of flights, so that meant that the people who couldn't afford flights or their own car would be there. There wasn't one time when I had an empty seat next to me. Sometimes it was just someone who would sleep, but a couple of times it was the nastiest guys, smelling like body odor and reeking of alcohol. I tried to cover my face and just hope for the next town. After more than 30 hours on the bus and no real sleep, I was done. As we approached St. Louis, I knew I had to get off. When I got off the bus, they wouldn't give me my bag. As it turns out, my bag had been put on a different bus and would meet me in Denver. So I grabbed a taxi to the airport and went to the counter. It was the first and the last time I got to say, "Give me the quickest ticket home." Luckily, the one-way ticket to Denver wasn't too expensive, and I was in Denver within 4 hours. I had a friend pick me up at the airport, and he drove me to my house to surprise my parents. I had to go back to the bus station in Denver a whole day later to pick up my bag. Greyhound is crazy. I will never do that again. It cost me 2 days of a very short leave. What did I learn? If you ask me what I learned from basic training, I can sum it up in just a few words: discipline, strength of character, confidence, and direction. Well, I pretty much knew by the end of basic that I wouldn't make the military my career. They had given me so much in just 9 weeks. I was proud to be serving my country. I was proud to be a soldier. Things were different during my shore leave at home for the holidays. I looked changed with very short hair. I was 15 pounds heavier, all muscle, and I probably used a lot more curse words than I did before I left. It felt surreal to be back in my house. I had time with my friends and family, but I was somewhat of an outsider now. I don't think you can understand what basic is like unless you experience. I have tried to share some of the events and my thoughts with you here in this book, but there is nothing like being awakened at 4 a.m. for PT, knowing that if you don't get out of bed, the drill sergeants will flip you out of it. There is nothing like having every moment of your life controlled, never to be alone with your thoughts. Basic training is sort of like prison, but it wasn't forever, and I did learn many things that made me a better person for the future. I learned that basically nothing I would face in life would be harder than those 9 weeks. Or so I thought at the time. Life could throw anything at me, and I could face it down with confidence. I was more organized and self directed. Leave time. My leave was just about 10 days, and then I was due at Fort Lee, Virginia for Advanced Individual Training, AIT, right after New Year's Day. This is where I would learn to be a petroleum supply specialist, 77 Foxtrot. They didn't give me an end date, but I'd heard rumors that it was 12 weeks of training. I had no way of checking or learning more, just had to wait to see what would happen. I did think about the future training a lot during that time I was on leave. I also had lots of nightmares from basic. Crazy visions of being in the dirt, push up after push up. I would wake up early in the morning wondering again where the hell I was. What I didn't miss was the sounds at night. It was so nice to sleep to silence instead of coughing, snoring, and general movements of 50 plus people in one room. On the 2nd of January, I said goodbye to my family and friends and boarded a plane. I was sad to leave my family and the comforts of my bed in civilian clothes, but it was time for the next part of my adventure.